Yep. So Jane Lee's doing her CLC today, and Jane's been working with us for about 9 months now. Karen and I have been her main supervisors, and Phil has been involved as well. So Jane's working on a topic that will, as you'll see, eventually sort of come to interface with our iPlay project, which, as most of you know, Diego and Kevin are also working on. Jane's also got quite a different topic than the other two, which she'll tell you about today. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you all for coming. I'll be presenting my PhD project today, and it focuses on user engagement in online professional development, taking a closer look at teacher training. So how I'll be presenting today, I'll give you some background information first, and then tell you a bit about my proposed studies. So I'll start off with online learning, tell you about what it's about and what the benefits are, but I thought I'd show you with a video, so similar to how you'd actually learn in an online learning environment.
Oh, hello. Now let's see. Ah yes, technology and the internet. Seems like we can't live without both nowadays. Mix these two together and the opportunities are endless. From online shopping, online banking, online entertainment, and online learning. So what is online learning? Also known as web-based learning or e-learning, is simply the delivery of educational materials via the internet. What's so great about it, you ask? Just follow me. First off, learning can take place whenever and wherever you live. Essentially, learning at your own convenience. Didn't catch that? No worries. The use of multimedia in online learning makes it easy to pause and replay videos. While you're at it, turn on the subtitles just in case. Essentially, learning at your own convenience. And if you cannot understand the language that is spoken, see if there's another subtitles option to choose from. Maybe this one works better for you? To sum everything up, the potential benefits of online learning are demonstrated by its flexibility, novelty, and scalability of knowledge transfer. That's all for now.
So essentially online learning is designed to make learning experiences more convenient for you. However, it does have its own issues. Essentially, a lot of people who actually start online learning courses, they don't actually finish them, and that has been found and supported in several studies. So why is that the case? Well, there are several major reasons, and on top of which online learning relies on individual self-regulation so that they pace themselves during their learning and finish within a certain period of time. Another major reason is individuals might be uncomfortable using technology, whether that be hardware or software in general. And lastly, online learning can be a very isolating experience because the interaction you actually get in an online learning platform is between yourself and that platform. So what's similar about all these issues is that they lead to a lack of involvement or interaction on the online learning platform. And this idea of involvement or interaction is what embodies engagement. So what exactly is engagement? Well, engagement is a construct that has been looked at in various disciplines, but because engagement means something different within each discipline, there isn't a really unifying definition for it. However, most disciplines have been able to divide engagement into these three domains, so behavioral, emotional, and cognitive. And it can be agreed that engagement is a positive active state. So within my PhD, I'll be focusing on online professional development. So there are three types of engagement that are relevant: work engagement, learning engagement, and technology use engagement. We'll start with work engagement. And it's defined as an individual's connection to their work. And a prominent researcher by the name of Khan In this area, he focused on something he termed as psychological presence. That's more akin to cognitive engagement, and these are the characteristics that are associated with psychological presence. So other researchers within this area looked at work engagement because of the prior limitations of research in negative psychological work states and stress and job burnout. So it's also within the organizational literature, that organizational sciences literature, that we find discussion about magnitude of engagement. And that's mostly talking about an individual's engagement towards their job versus engagement towards larger organizational functions. So the second type of engagement, learning engagement, is an individual's investment of effort in educational activities. And interest in this area grew from a desire to increase student motivation, to increase student achievement, and also to increase retention rate as a way to decrease dropout rates. So it is also within the educational literature that we find talk about depth of engagement, and as Fredericks points out, any one domain that is missing from the three limits the potential learning that can be attained. So this is more easily explained with surface learning and deep learning. So surface learning, individuals are just doing an educational assignment just for the sake of doing it, so they're behaviorally engaged, but then that's all. So if students are, they assign more value to what they're doing, they're emotionally and or cognitively engaged, and they have a deeper understanding of why they're doing what they're doing. And so the third type of engagement is technology use engagement, which is just termed as user engagement. It's defined as the interaction between an individual and the technological resource. So a lot of research in this has grown in the last 2 decades, mostly because of increase of access to internet, so there's increased growth in online learning as well. So researchers have found that because there's so many different applications for technology, each application actually is characterized differently if they're engaged, or engagement is characterized differently for each application. However, researchers O'Brien and Thoms have attempted to characterize engagement with general internet use, and these are the, I guess, characteristics they found. However, it is important to know that they do also understand that some of these factors don't actually translate well over to specific types of internet, specific types of applications for the internet. But from the research that has been done, it's been found that user engagement is a quality of the user experience. So the 3 types of engagement that I've talked about, the one that I'll be using to inform and actually structure my PhD is that of user engagement, because I'm interested in the interaction between an individual and the technological resource. And what's great about this definition is that it can be applied to any setting where technology is used. So some of the theories that have gone into the development of that definition are flow, which is when an individual is so immersed in an experience that they become oblivious to their surroundings and sense of time. Play is when an activity fulfills the individual's psychological and social needs. Aesthetic is when an activity stimulates an individual's intrinsic motivation, joy, pleasure, and sense of curiosity. And lastly, information interaction, where the processes of using the technological resource actually encourages the individual to interact with the content that's on the resource. So now that we know a little bit about what engagement is, how do we know if something is engaging or not? Well, as I mentioned before, user engagement is a quality of the user experience, and by nature that is subjective. However, Atfield and colleagues have argued that, especially with technology use, even subjective experiences should result in objectivable, observable consequences. So that means that user engagement should have both subjective and objective measures. So the subjective measures include surveys and interviews, while objective measures include web metrics and physiological measures. So what I mean by web metrics is how long people use a technological resource and how often they come back to that resource. Physiological measures include things like pupil dilation, body temperature, heart rate, and such. So why is there an interest in engagement in online professional development? Well, previous research on engagement in professional development has been linked with increased in job performance, so that means it's not only beneficial for the individual, but also beneficial for the whole organization that they work for. However, literature on engagement in online learning has mostly been focused on primary to tertiary education settings, and it can be argued that within these types of educational settings, the aims and objectives are different from the aims and objectives of work settings. So of the existing literature, it has been found that online participation is in part influenced by offline factors such as work life and personal life. And some of these factors include job characteristics such as stress, social support from peers and family, and online learning platform characteristics such as usability. So because online learning caters to a range of individuals from toddlers to the elderly, there has been a lot of discussion on how to appropriately structure online learning. And it has been found that with pedagogy, it's most useful when you're trying to teach new concepts. And it just so happens it coincides with how teaching is structured for primary to tertiary education settings. So with andragogy, this is more relevant with professional development, and the aims of that is actually to get individuals to reflect on what they learned in the curriculum and how they can apply that into their lives. But the researchers have discussed, well, we can't exactly just use pedagogy or andragogy when teaching in an online environment, because technology and the internet, they don't differentiate whether you're a child or you're an adult. So they came up with something called cybergogy, an approach to teaching in an online environment. And so researchers Hung and Kine came up with a cybergogy approach for engaged learning in an online learning environment. And as you can see in the Venn diagram, those circles kind of are similar to the different domains of engagement. And they list out what needs to be achieved in order to acquire engaged learning. However, there hasn't been a lot of empirical evidence for this model to say if it works or not. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be taking a closer look at teacher training in my PhD project. So I was looking at what are some of the offline influences that would affect their engagement with the professional development course. And Borqua's model summarizes that nicely, especially with the work life. So there's facilitators for the course, and then there's other teachers that are taking the training with them. However, as I mentioned, there's also personal life. So I added another section that overlaps the professional development course onto Borqua's model, since both work life and personal life are offline factors that may influence engagement. So now that you know a little bit of the background information, what exactly is the research problem? Well, more and more organizations are actually delivering professional development as online learning. However, people are still not finishing those courses, and so we want to make more engaging learning experiences. However, when we look at the literature, this area is not comprehensively studied, and so whatever new experiences, learning experiences we create are limited by the current knowledge. So what my PhD aims to, find out is first to identify factors that are associated with user engagement, and then secondly, to see if those factors explain user engagement within online teacher professional learning. And so I have 3 studies to answer those 2 questions. So the first is the systematic review, and it aims to identify factors associated with user engagement existing in the academic literature. And the studies that I'll be interested in looking at are where participants are employed and they're enrolled in an online professional development course. And this course has to be delivered via the internet, partially or fully delivered via the internet. And what I mean by partially is sometimes professional development is structured as blended learning. So there is a face-to-face component, but there is still an online component. I'm also looking at studies where they quantitatively assess user engagement and where these studies are published in peer-reviewed journals. So how I went about to actually look for these potential studies is I broke down my research question into 3 concepts. And for each concept, I compiled a list of relevant terms and then searched them all together on electronic databases. So the procedures for this systematic review are first to upload all those potential studies onto Confidence, which is an online systematic review software. And another reviewer and I will actually do all the screening on there, so all the titles, abstracts, and full text screening will be done on there. And then I'll extract the data into a piloted form, and then another reviewer will double check against the original publications if they did that correctly or not. And all included studies will undergo a quality assessment. So the progress so far is I started out with 19,500-ish so records, and then Confidence automatically deleted duplicates, so title and abstract screening would be 13,000-ish, and it hasn't been totally finished, so the estimated amount of studies that will have to go through full text screening is around 400. So the second study aims to answer a similar...
Could I have a question, or do you want to wait until you're done?
Sure.
For the systematic review, are you looking at studies that compare online learning with traditional forms of learning, or are you just looking at studies that look at online learning?
I'm including all studies at the moment, and just as long as they measure user engagement.
Okay, so the vast majority of the studies will only be looking at online learning?
I will also include studies that compare. It's just that I'm mostly just focusing on the online learning side of it, even if it's doing a comparison within the study. Yeah.
Okay.
So my second study is that study. It aims to answer a similar research question as the first one. However, I'll be approaching experts to gain their opinions on what they believe facilitate user engagement. So why am I exactly using this method? It's because a lot of the research on engagement has been done mostly in the industry, because sometimes academia just doesn't have the funds to do that kind of research, and so approaching experts within the industry is a good way to tap into, I guess, a knowledge pool that may not be always accessible within academia. So what exactly is the Delphi method? Well, it aims to build expert consensus through a series of surveys. And mostly this method is used when the topic of interest includes various stakeholders or is multidisciplinary in nature. So as I mentioned, online learning has become an industry of its own. So research that is conducted within organizations may not always find its way into academic literature. So what exactly am I trying to achieve from the Delphi? I want to build consensus independently, and what I mean by that is rather than having a group of people doing a focus group, having one person say something and then other people feeling pressured to either agree or disagree with that individual. What's great about the Delphi is it focuses a lot on confidentiality and anonymity, and so they get all the opinions from every single participant. However, each participant is free to express how they feel the opinions should be or should not be. So the primary objective for the Delphi is, of course, to identify factors associated with user engagement, but also for me to understand what other participants understand as engagement, and also for me to tell them what I mean by engagement, and then standardize that terminology for engagement within my PhD. So one of the most important steps of a Delphi study is actually participant selection. So I'll be approaching experts within the online learning and professional development fields. And I'll be identifying these individuals through existing colleagues, contacts with other notable individuals. And I'll be looking for a sample size of 15 to 20 participants, which is similar to other Delphi studies. So the steps for this study are first to get ethics approval, and then to recruit participants. And we get to the first survey, which is an open-ended survey. So I'll be asking all the participants to give their opinions, and then I'll compile all that, all the results from that survey, and put it into the second survey, where I'll ask the participants to rank which opinion they think is most important to least important. And then for the third survey, I'll compile the results from the second survey and let all the participants see the rankings, and then the participants either agree or disagree or reassess any judgment from previous surveys, and then we'll reach consensus with that. So my last study will aim to look at the factors that I've identified from studies 1 and 2, and to have them explain user engagement patterns in online teacher professional learning courses. And as you can guess, that online teacher professional learning course is iPlay. So I'll give you an overview of what iPlay is. It's an internet-based professional learning course for primary school teachers in New South Wales, aiming to help them implement a physical activity and fundamental skills program within their classrooms. So it started in 2016 and will be disseminated in approximately 200 schools, so around 2,000 teachers will undergo iPlay training. I will do a power analysis to determine the minimum number of teachers that I need for the study. So iPlay is structured as blended learning, and so there is a 2-hour face-to-face workshop and also 9 online modules that they need to complete over 3 school terms. And so with this study, I have actually multiple data sources. So the first is teacher surveys that will ask about demographic information, job characteristics, and their efficacy with technology on the internet. And that's where I'll be matching up with the factors I've identified in studies 1 and 2. So the remaining data sources are all measures of user engagement. The first of which is metrics, web metrics, and that mostly that measures behavioral engagement, and it's quantitative in nature. And so the remaining 2 data sources are qualitative in nature, the first of which is iPlay responses. So within the iPlay training, teachers have to reflect on what they've learned in each module. So I'll be taking their responses from that. And then after all the training has been done, I'll be interviewing teachers to understand their experiences during the iPlay training. So the procedures for this study are first to get the teachers to complete the surveys, and then I'll compile all that data and then match them with the factors I identified with studies 1 and 2, and then the teachers complete the training, and then I'll get the web metrics there and do some preliminary data analysis to find which teachers are behaviorally engaged and which are not. That way I can get a purposeful sampling of teachers to interview afterwards. So there are several data analyses that I'll be doing. So just a reminder that these data sources are all measures of user engagement. Web metrics is quantitative. iPlay responses and teacher interviews are qualitative in nature. However, I'll be using a quantitative approach to analyze the web metrics and the iPlay responses. So with the web metrics, I'll be doing multi-level linear regression. And that's because the schools within the iPlay project are identified by socioeconomic status and whether they're in a rural region or urban region or a regional region. And so there will be clustering effects there, so I'll need to adjust for that. So with the iPlay responses, I'll be doing content analysis, looking at the length of the responses, as well as the number of descriptive words they use within the response to give some idea of cognitive and emotional engagement. And then lastly, with the teacher interviews, I'll be using a phenomenological approach to identify common themes for engaged teachers and non-engaged teachers. So just a reminder of everything that I'll be doing with the studies. First, systematic review in the Delphi study are there to identify factors associated with user engagement, and then the observational study is there to use those factors to explain teacher engagement within online professional development. That wraps up my presentation. So I want to thank my supervisory panel for their supervising, and and to thank everyone for their time and advice and support.
Let me clarify something on study 3. I'm assuming that as part of the initial survey that you're going to be asking teachers for subjective measures of engagement?
The survey is mainly for, it's mainly for identifying factors rather than measures of user engagement.
Will that be done before they do the online survey or
Yeah.
after? Because I would think that it would be very important to have a survey of teachers to get subjective, and then you can cross-validate the subjective ratings with the web metrics. I would suspect that there are two different sources, and which one would be most credible might depend on your perspective. But I would suspect that if that you would have to have teacher, you would want to be able to relate the metrics to the teacher responses in parallel sorts of ways, and it certainly would be much easier to separate out the different components of engagement and so forth that you're looking at with survey items than it would be the web metrics. Also, my understanding is that everybody is one online learning.
Right?
Everybody is doing the same online learning,
Yeah.
so there's no manipulation
No.
of the online learning. And so that the major characteristics that you want to look at, you'd have no control over. No, it's even worse than not having any control over. They're fixed.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, obviously, things like how skillful, the technology skills that the teachers have, I can understand where those would be identifying factors, but it would seem to me that most of the identifying factors that you're going to come up with are things that are held constant here. I mean, anything that has to do with design of the online learning, the context is largely the same. There may be some variation from school to school, but probably not because it's not school-based. So what are the potential engagement factors or the identifying factors that are actually going to vary in study 3?
Jane, you can bring her behind the curtain a little bit if you like and tell them about some of the things we considered but you didn't put in. That's totally fine.
Is this the Wizard of Oz and Toad
Well, I think so far in the literature that I found that our factors, they're all really qualitative, and it is actually a challenge that the literature has spoken about. There's the lack of integration between subjective and objective measures, and I guess with the main thing right now, it's mostly just see which ones will make those, which ones in combination are going to result in a more engaged teacher versus a less engaged teacher. We'll have to identify first those, and then then we can try and manipulate them for teachers who were disengaged, and if they undergo this sort of manipulation, then they would become more engaged, I think.
My fear, and I'm not looking behind the curtain well enough, but my fear is that you've got relatively few identifying factors that are going to vary in study 3. And so without having any variation in the material that's presented, that study is going to be weak from that. And I would think that you would really want to strengthen it by having the survey, because I think a good study that looked at the cross-validated the web metrics with the survey would be a valuable contribution. But okay, I'm not on your supervisory.
Any more questions?
I mean, the other thing you could mention there, Jane, is just the idea that we've discussed the possibility of some A/B testing. Right. So
Of manipulating, of varying the online survey, so it becomes actually an experimental
So the
study.
sequence of the intervention.
sort of elements of the intervention
Yeah.
itself. So I mean, in one of Jane's models there, she looked at the different elements that might influence, and one of them is the actual course itself. So there are elements within the course at the moment that we've done sort of based on best practice, but I mean, we don't really know if they work or not. So for example, I mean, teachers get notifications that they're having a module that's due soon. We don't know if those actually do anything. They probably do, but we don't really know. So one of the things that, depending on sort of how things progress and what Jane finds in her first couple of studies, we may end up doing some A/B testing to see if some of those things are making a difference or not experimentally. But I guess the feeling is at the moment that that's making the PhD pretty large. Yeah, feeds it with you. Because their last study potentially does have sort of 2 studies in one. So it's sort of be adding an extra layer that, not ruling it out, but yeah, it'd be nice to do.
I think there's also value in having good quality descriptive studies. We don't have enough of those in social science, and I think sometimes we can jump to experiments before we really have a good description of the problem. And while I'm sure there's lots of papers on online learning in relation to teacher training is probably nothing, or very little.
Yeah.
So a good quality descriptive study makes sense to me.
Oh, I wasn't knocking the descriptive studies. That wasn't the question that I was getting at. The question I was getting at is that so much of the potential variation in online learning seems to be held constant in the study that you have, that the generalizability of what you're talking about will be very limited. It'll be in focus primarily on characteristics of the teachers themselves.
Yeah.
So first of all, Jane, thank you for the great and very well structured and also very appealing presentation. And I don't have a real question. I'm rather interested in if it goes in the same direction as hers. I was just wondering if it would be possible, because in the beginning you made this distinction between user engagement and work engagement, and if it were possible to use, for example, that web data, the web metrics, and because there probably you'll have lots of measurement points in those, if it were possible from that to predict something like work engagement in the long run, just from guessing that Chris in the iPlay study is assessing work engagement.
Well, from the previous, I think I noted that work engagement or engagement in professional development has been linked with increased job performance. So it would make sense to to guess that increase if a person's more engaged in the online professional development, they would be a bit more engaged in the long run with their work engagement. But there's also, you have to take into account that how long a person's been working. Sometimes if they've been working too long, job burnout and job stress also affect whether they are engaged or not. So yeah.
I think this relates more to 1 and 2. When I think about online professional development, there's the kind of canned modular stuff that I think is the focus of this study. But there's also increasingly webinars and peer coaching and group coaching and everything done through an online platform. So are you excluding that in 1 and 2?
I am excluding, I guess more. Yeah, I'm looking at mostly modular course ones because that's the ones that are going to continue to exist, even though there will be more, I guess, innovative ways because I guess there's different, I guess, technology and technological advances has made it so that there's simulations and then there's virtual reality. Like, it's just training has become more and more sophisticated. However, just trying to get these kind of modular kind of professional development courses are still going to be there.
Yeah.
And so I'm mainly looking at this so because it'll continue to exist mostly. It's kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's sort of standardised and so forth. I can see the point of that. It just struck me as a result of your presentation that online actually isn't the key word. The key word is something like automated or repeatable or asynchronous or something like that. I mean, all of my professional development's online now, but hardly any of it is like this. It's all speaking to people.
I have a question. In the COC, you speak about qualitatively, like speaking to the teachers. How many people are you talking about? You're talking about 2,000 teachers doing that. I mean, I was confused about where you're at with that. How many teachers are going to take the survey? And how many teachers from the iPlay are going to be actually interviewed?
Well, all the teachers are going to do the survey. So,
Or asked to?
Or asked, yes. Hopefully they'll all do it. And then in terms of how many I'll interview, I guess that I probably should do some sort of calculation on how many I would need to do, but probably not 2,000.
Well, no, you couldn't. But I mean, the thing is that when you're writing a budget for funding, you need to know how many people you're going to interview. And my other question would be, with the interviews, are you going to also interview people that are not engaged, that are not doing it? So that wasn't clear to me either. So how many people are going to do that are engaged and how many that you're going to do that aren't engaged? So, because the questions, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So
you have to make that very clear.
okay.
Okay.
So I'm curious to learn more about those objective measures of engagement, and was just hoping that you could just briefly describe some of those measures in your study.
So far what I've come across is objective measures that include how long people spend on an online platform, how many clicks, and how many clicks per page kind of thing, how many number of resources that people access within an online learning platform, how long it actually takes them between the first time that they go to the resource and the second time that they go to the resource, and the number of times they keep returning to that resource, that kind of thing.
So that's with the teachers that are actually doing iPlay.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that I was thinking about was that in looking at whole lots of studies on people going to websites, is it teachers? You have teachers up there, but you don't mention a teacher until page 12 or something. So I was getting a bit lost in the teacher training when I was reading the COC.
Yeah.
So are we going to do like teachers doing teachers, or are we just going to do professionals? I just need it clarified for me.
Well, it's because the first and second study, they'll be looking at overall all professionals who actually need to do online professional development, and the third study is when you're looking at teachers as a subset of
And how do you determine the professionals? What is your gauge for professionals?
So what I defined as professionals are individuals who have to go through specialized training, and then through that training and within their work, they have to employ individual judgment. However, with the online professional development, it's mostly focusing on the type of professional development that helps them grow within their profession. So the professional development has to be related to their work rather than something that they've taken, like a course that they've taken for personal interest, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So within back to the engagement, within the objective measures of engagement, is there any notion of examining different qualities of engagement from these types of data?
From what I've read so far, objective measures, especially with web metrics, are mostly measures of behavioral engagement. However, with physiological measures, that can be linked with more emotional and cognitive, based on just involuntary bodily reactions, and you can link it with, I guess, the subjective measures of emotional and cognitive engagement. Yeah.
Okay.
Jan, that's a very easy question so far. That animation at the beginning, you did that yourself, right?
Yeah.
How long did that take you?
Took me a weekend.
It was worth it.
But how long would it take you to do something like that again?
I think probably the same amount of time, because
Really? Oh,
I think
okay.
the hardest part, I guess, is kind of the golden rule for online learning is you can have a really crappy animation, but if your sound is not great, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose, which my sound wasn't that great. So I had to really think hard on how to, I guess, make it better with the animation. Yeah.
I was quite amazed when when somebody was talking about machine learning and they had a robot doing it, and which is not too different from what you're talking about. And they were able to show a significant difference when the robot was lip synced.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? No? Well, thank you, and,
Mike's got it.
oh,
No, it's
sorry.
okay, I can ask afterwards, it's okay. It's fine.
Somebody else might be interested?
Well, I was going to say, because you talked about the physiological reactions,
Yeah.
and I know that like people's dilate when we start, you always get the systems confused, but when we go into sort of the deep learning and hard processing, and often people find learning really hard, and that's when you start to get the physiological reactions. I wonder whether, is there any way that you can either in the systematic review, the Delphi study, or in the final study, look at some, not just the engagement, how much people are doing, because people are engaged in YouTube, it doesn't mean they're necessarily learning anything.
Yeah.
Between what they're learning and what they're sort of engaged in, because sometimes I feel like there's a tension, you know, you can be really engaged in something but not actually learn anything from it. Or you can be, like, you can kind of hate it, but you're learning so quickly that it's really useful. Is there any way in any of the studies to kind of bring in like a learning outcome? Or is that on the cards at the moment? Or,
It can be on the cards.
The survey that you're going to contemplate would easily get at that.
I think you might actually have that data there already, Jane. Yeah, because you've got like, I mean, many of the things that teachers are entering into the system on iPlay are not just reflections, but they're actually content. Like they have to answer questions about the content that they are meant to have learned. And then they get presented with those model answers. So you could look at marking, if you like, those answers as a way of assessing learning. Yeah, I think that's fairly surface learning, but well, I don't know. Yeah, think about it now.
but that, you know, there's, I think that Harvard now have an algorithm that I think they were saying about this, that can mark an essay with like 80%, 90% accuracy based on the language people are using, and you know, it's sort of machine learning. So I mean, you could get the depth of the learning through something like that. But I wonder even if the Delphi study, if you could also separate engage, you can just ask a question like, you know, is there anything about the learning or the best way to teach as well as the way to keep people clicking? Because all of your metrics seem so far that if someone's just clicking sort of aimlessly, we don't know that they're learning from that. You know, the videos we make could be really engaging because we've got some pretty actors, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're actually learning anything from it.
There is a text mining component to your the study 3 though, isn't there? And that there is ways of looking at, you know, cognitive complexity of the answers and those sorts of things. So there would be ways of just getting a surface, but also the deep level learning.
Yeah, we had to work on.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'm looking around very carefully.